Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cleve podcast. This is John LaFront, and today's conversation is one we honestly probably need to have way more often. Because when people talk about boundaries, they usually talk about the hard part, right? The grief, the backlash, the fear, the loneliness, the loss, the people who misunderstand you, the relationships that change. And all of that is real, but there is another side of boundaries that does not get talked about enough: what they give back to us. For both of us, both Ashley and I, boundaries have not just been about removing unhealthy patterns from our lives. They have created space to breathe, space to think, space to heal, space to hear God, space to rediscover who we actually are underneath the fear, the people pleasing, the image management, and the constant pressure to keep everyone else comfortable. In this episode, we're talking about life after boundaries, the joy that can come back into your life, the creativity that can wake up, the courage that can grow, the hobbies, passions, friendships, purpose, and self-trust that can begin to emerge when the noise finally gets quiet. Ashley shares how pickleball and gardening become part of her healing and self-discovery. I talk about what it has meant for me to step into public vulnerability, run for city council, and eventually build a platform that has now reached millions of people. Because boundaries are not the end of your story. Sometimes they are the doorway into the life God has been trying to help you build. Let's jump into it. All right, well, we're excited to dive into this subject. It's one that actually came out of, well, it was at least inspired by a comment that somebody made in one of our events, our webinar events that we did on Wednesday. And what did they say exactly, honey? Do you remember?
Well, I was just talking about the benefit of boundaries and all the things that ultimately you get back. Like, we often talk about the pain associated with boundaries, but why is all of it worth it? And I was just talking about the joy and the growth that came, and she said that would be a good workshop
She's like, that's your next
conversation.
one.
Yeah. And I thought, you know what? We really should be talking about that more than we do.
Sometimes we talk so much about like the practicality of boundaries and why they're important, but there's been so much on the other side of that healing journey, for both of us, both individually, but then also as a couple, and I think for our family at large. So that's what we're going to jump into today as best as we possibly can. And I think it's going to be a great discussion. So to kind of kick it off, here's a question for you, Ashley. When we say life after boundaries, what does that phrase actually bring up for you?
Oh man. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but I would just say, yeah, life after boundaries. I feel like if I would choose one word, I would say expansive.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah, it's
So go
just
deeper than that.
and my sense of self, I think, really expanded after boundaries because that's when I stopped looking to everybody else for approval or signals of, what they thought of me. I started to really just pay attention to what I thought of me and what I thought of my life and the different scenarios I was in, like I'm crafting this life for me. And for too long, I sat and looked to everybody else to like measure or get cues of like, what should I be thinking about me? And boundaries really created the space for me to not worry about what everybody was thinking about my life and just to have me start living it and crafting it in a way that I wanted to and that I was proud of.
Yeah. Well, Ashley and I talk a lot about, it really is such a big event. And it's not just the one big boundary that we often talk about, it's boundaries in general, because as we shifted the course of our life, it did impact friendships, it impacted um, other family relationships, and all sorts of different things, because all of a sudden it was this whole new world that we could open up to. And that is a weird, like, leveling up event in your life that does come with grief. I mean, we want to also make space for that too, of realizing that, yes, there are some repercussions. And that's why people sometimes are scared to set boundaries, is because they fear the hard. And there is hard, but you
Yeah.
have to go through it in order for it to be, and I think the word expansive is great, but it's such a bizarre, like, holy cow, I can actually do this, or I can actually say this, or I can actually go after, trying this something new or that. And you then all of a sudden realize the power that so many people had control over you. And whether it was intentional or unintentional, it just
Yeah.
was. And we often identify as recovering people pleasers. And we say that in jest, but it is actually true. Our life was very much built off of people pleasing. And there was a lot of people that knew that about us and took advantage of it. And it was our kind of, a lot of people say people pleasing is selfish, and it is, but it's like this self-preservation thing that exists, with people pleasing. But
Yeah. It's like the people pleasing, you're trying to control other people's perception of you so that they don't abandon you, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's like you're trying to stay alive by crafting a version of yourself that will be accepted by other people, but in the end you don't really come to know who you are as a result, and you don't take the opportunities to develop bravery and yeah, just a sense of individuality and what do I like and what do I not like, and what is me? Who am I? Where do I begin and other people stop? So,
yeah. And I think a lot of people are getting to know us in this post-boundary phase of life. They don't know us in the pre, kind of realm. And truly, none of this would have happened 5 years ago.
oh, well, no,
There's no
because
chance we would have ever had a podcast.
I mean, I specifically battled anxiety for years over this very thing, speaking about it,
Yeah.
because I felt inspired to speak, but I was so conditioned to no, like make it all look good, sweep everything uncomfortable under the rug, like don't speak about truth. That's speaking negatively of somebody else in some way or another. Like, we don't do that. Good people don't do that. It's noble to just stay silent over hard and tough situations. And I still get tons of that messaging even today. But
But I mean, a lot of it, there's the element of the subject matter that we're tackling, but even just the element of having the confidence to speak publicly.
yeah, oh,
It's
for sure.
like when I started actually doing face video messages, it was even people that we love and still have relationships with. There was chatter and can you believe John's doing this? And it's so embarrassing or this, that, or the other. And you have to overcome it and just kind of say, I don't really care what you think about what I feel inspired and prompted to do. I'm going to just do it anyways. And I don't know, like, so for me, it's such a freeing feeling because all of a sudden, the only people that I care about, their opinions really is God and my wife. That's it. And if I feel like we're in alignment and we're all okay with it, and there's things that I've said or done or activities that I've gone after that have been uncomfortable for Ashley, for example, like when I ran for city council. She didn't want to do it, but she was supportive of it. And that was an experience that I needed to go through. And I got a lot of criticism for it, and it was an uncomfortable journey, but it was a very important part of my journey to step into, no, this is something I believe in. I'm going to be bold with it. I'm going to put myself out there and see if I can make a difference,
Yeah, totally. And you did make a difference. And yeah, I just think, and for me, so many things I didn't go after or I didn't even like develop in the first place at all because, like the people in my life were very critical of even just others, not even necessarily of me, but it's like you watch and see anybody trying to do anything, and it's like they take their opportunity to criticize. Even somebody who maybe gave a talk in church or something, it would be like, oh, that sucked. And so you just realize like you're very conditioned to be like, oh, people are watching and they're going to speak negatively of anything I do. And so it really did keep me from like knowing and developing my own strengths because I just thought, well, I don't want their judgment, like they would definitely make fun of me for that or whatever. And so it held me back in ways that I didn't know. Like often this is happening more subconsciously than it is conscious, right? And then you go through life and you start to do something different and you start seeing through a different lens and your consciousness, right? Your level of consciousness rises. And I think that that's what happened to me. I suddenly, putting boundaries in place helped me to just face the fact that doing what was best for me was going to disappoint other people.
Yeah.
And I had to realize that that was going to happen and I could no longer serve both masters, them and myself or my marriage or my own life, you know? And it hit a tipping point where I had to, in order to maintain I knew what was best for us, I had to let go of their opinions, and that just started in the form of boundaries. Like, you can't have this kind of control over me. I'm no longer going to allow it. And I suddenly started to realize just how much their opinions had kept control over every aspect of my being and what I was willing to try to develop and become and not. And most things were like not. I wasn't really.
One thing I thought would be interesting to talk about too is just how people pleasing and kind of life before boundaries felt to us physically. You know, one of the books that's really impacted my life in the last couple of years is The Body Keeps Score. And the reason why, and that one talks more specifically about trauma and grief and things of that nature, at least that's why I read the book. But when I think of my life before boundaries and after, there is a physical part of it too. And our bodies can often signal to us when things are not healthy. And I think that was one of the first clues that we had that it had gone too far. And
Yeah.
for me, I'll go first on what it felt like. It felt like debilitating depression. We were seeking for answers constantly through every means possible to try and get me to lift out of the heaviness of the fog of that whole thing. And I really felt like I was drowning, kind of, and was completely lost in who I was, as a person. And it just felt awful. And when I think of myself now versus then, it's just such a night and day feeling. But I think some people that may be struggling with debilitating depression, anxiety, things of that nature, and you've tried everything, sometimes the biggest clue is look at the people around you and
Mm-hmm.
how are they impacting how you feel? Because when you remove toxic or unhealthy people, it's amazing how that burden just lifts off of your shoulders. It's like, oh, I finally feel free, because people can have that presence over you that's just really, really heavy.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that for me, it was, a lot of confusion. I think it's interesting. And this is the first time I'm putting words to this thought, but I've thought about it a lot. Like, everyone knows that like gossiping about other people is not good, right? And I've always tried not to gossip. But on the other hand, I'm like, there's weird things about people sometimes that you just have to be like, why are they doing that? Or, and I'm like, I'm not seeking to gossip to tear somebody down, but I would say that talking about other people for me would often come as a source of confusion. And I just like want to work it out, but I'd be confused because I'm like, I'm not trying to say anything negative about this person, but this is really weird. Like, are we not really not supposed to see it, And I think that being in toxic relationships really does create a lot of confusion because you have these people who are kind of like posturing themselves up to be the epitome of wonderful. And there's a problem with everybody else. And when you are seeking truth, you kind of feel the disconnect, but you don't know the answers yet. And I would say that in myself, I was more critical of other people before this in general, mostly because I was confused within myself. Um, so, and that was like draining. I would say for me, it affected my energy more than anything else because I didn't really know where the truth was. I was conditioned to kind of like believe these people's lies and like know that these people were suffering in ways that weren't fair, but also blame them for not being whatever, this and that. Like, I don't know. Toxic and especially narcissistic people create a lot of confusion in regards to how you see other people, even and yourself. And so I was just totally in confusion, and I would be constantly trying to figure out like what's true about people and even myself, right? And it just, I think, was exhausting.
Yeah. Exhausting would be felt by both of us. And I think I just very vividly remember leaving like a dinner or an event or something with those types of personalities. And look, we can all have that even with our healthy relationships sometimes where it just felt heavy after you left. But the important thing is for you to look at patterns. And if it happens repeatedly, that when you spend time with these personality types that have such control over you, and if you always leave the event rather than feeling uplifted and energized and inspired and joyful, if it's the opposite of all of that, where it just feels heavy and uncomfortable and like dread and resentment, that's like the telltale sign that a boundary needs to be implemented. And because you're often doing things that don't bring you that joy, right? And watch the pattern happen over and over time. Your body will signal to you what is safe and what is not, and what is good for you and what is not. And then spend your time wisely, kind of like moving forward beyond that. But
Yeah. Well, and I would also add, like, there are still people that we are in relationship with today that kind of the way they see things and talk about circumstances or other people, it can feel heavy, and I don't always agree with them, right? So it's not like a boundary needs to be put in place around every person. I just see it for what it is now today. Like, oh, that person is constantly frustrated by this same situation because they haven't really learned how to separate yet. They'll get there. Like, I don't take it on anymore, right? And so even when there are tiring relationships that I don't necessarily feel like I need a huge boundary around,
right. But
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 like
I think it's also boundaries not just an all or nothing thing. There's
yeah,
different layers and levels of
totally.
boundaries. And also to your point, I think now that we're several years into healing, we now have more capacity for that and more knowledge about why things maybe feel heavy or about dysfunction that might exist. And we have more tolerance for it. But we
Yeah.
needed to create a pretty strong boundary to get to the place where we could heal in order for our eyes and everything else to be more open to the reality of the situation so that we had capacity for other
Yeah.
people. And if we hadn't done that, it just kind of like kept depleting to the point where you just lose who you are as a person, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So yeah, I also want to make that abundantly clear. Like, and we've said this many times, a boundary is not meant to be a giant wall that you cannot penetrate. Like, it can be something as simple as a gate or a fence around your house that is not, you know what I mean? Like, it's still inviting, it still can be there, but it is there to kind of protect your sacred space. And that's really important.
Yeah. Totally. Good points.
So when you look at boundaries, and we've kind of talked about the heaviness, and we've talked about kind of the feelings that come after it. What then is possible with those new feelings?
Yeah.
When you get rid of the dread and the heavy, sky's the limit. Can you do absolutely anything?
Well, hopefully. I mean, that's the hope, right? I think we're all trying to get to that point where we're like, okay, we can do anything. But yeah, I think to focus, which is what we wanted to do this episode, on really what are the benefits. We know that there's a cost, and we know that there is grief imminently after, but then, is that the right word? Imminently? No.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Immediately after.
Immediately after.
Yeah.
But like, what are the benefits? Why go through all the pain and hardship? And this is what I wanted to focus on, because I'm just like, you know what? The sense of self that I've developed and the confidence, I just feel way more alive. And I'm not nearly as scared of life as I used to be. And even my ability to tolerate catastrophic events has like really increased, because I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't want bad things to happen, but like I know that they will continue to, and I now feel very equipped to get through them. Of like, I know how to turn to my Savior and to get answers. But in order to do all of that, I had to let go of the people whose kind of permission to live my life I was constantly seeking. And when I did that, I just felt so much good energy come in. And I found, for probably the first thing that I really found that brought me joy was pickleball. And we've talked about that occasionally. And, I didn't get into pickleball because I just loved pickleball, actually. In fact, a few years before all of this went down, I had a friend that said, "Oh, my husband and I are going to play pickleball." And I literally felt dread for her. Like, why would you just choose to go play this random game? I really knew nothing about it. But the thing that I really didn't like was it sounded exhausting. And I just remember thinking, like, who has energy for that? Not me. And suddenly I create a lot of boundaries that I needed to in my life. And then it was COVID, and we moved, and we weren't really planning on moving during COVID. In fact, we spent the entire year feeling bad for people who did, and then we did, kind of as a surprise toward the end of the year. And then that next spring, the women in my neighborhood were playing pickleball weekly, and I started going plain and simply because I needed connection. I had just created these boundaries with all of these people in my life, and I was desperate to feel like I had a tribe, because I kind of had my whole tribe just like go out from under me. And so I started to go, and I went for connection, and the connection is what kept me there. But I have some older women in my neighborhood, and I just love them forever because they were just really patient with the fact that I was bad. Like I didn't really ever think that I could be athletic. And so I wasn't that great, but they just were really encouraging and hung with me. And I started to see myself getting better at this thing that at first I had like a total aversion to. And then I started going for reasons that were everything besides the game itself. But then I started to see that I was progressing and improving. And this might sound weird, but it's like the first time I had really seen that happen in me. Like, I didn't play sports when I was a kid. My mom put us in music classes, but I'm really not that gifted musically. Like, I'm okay. I have some skills, but nothing great. So to see myself progress in something, I was like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. And then I started liking the game because I started seeing myself progress in it, and like, oh, maybe I can improve or get better at this. And that just kind of unlocked something in me that helped me see myself in a different light. And again, I had let go of all these relationships with people who kind of told me my whole life who I was and who I was not. And I started to believe that I could be something different and see that I could have different skills and grow into something. And it's hard to put into words, but I think a lot of it was me allowing myself to grow into something that they didn't first give me permission to, be, which, I don't know, it was really helpful. And then, as time went on, I started throwing myself into my garden. We had this house, and it's a much bigger yard than we've ever had. And I just remember looking, and there were a couple plants in the front. And I was like, I hate those plants. And they were like mature. I was like, can I rip them out? And I remember thinking, no, I can't. They're mature plants. Like, why would I rip those out? And then I was like, this is my yard and my house. If I hate those plants, I should be able to rip them out. It kind of like, I don't know. I just gave myself permission, and I ripped them out, and I planted my favorite plant in the whole world in their place, hydrangeas. And I loved the way that looked. Just that small transformation in one, like 5-foot square space. And it made such a difference to me in the way I saw my house and like how I pulled up. And I would just pull up and I would see the hydrangeas and I would get so happy. And that kind of propelled me to do more. Suddenly I did like the space on either side of the hydrangeas. And then I just kept going and I loved the change. And it was almost symbolic of the change that was happening in myself, of just like, I am ripping out all of these things that are fully established that no longer, like, I don't like them anymore. And I see that I don't like them. And I'm going to get rid of them and I'm going to put things that I do like in its place. And I developed a love for gardening and just seeing the beauty and using my creativity in that way. I just never done it. We've owned houses before and I don't know, I never even thought that I could be capable of this. And it just kind of woke up my spirit to be able to use my creative energy in a way that I had never done it before. And I remember in the beginning, and this makes me laugh now, but I battled like the temptation to feel insecure because I actually come from a long line of gardeners. My grandma was a phenomenal gardener. My mom has always had an immaculate garden. My oldest sister is like a complete perfectionist and her, house and yard is always pristine and they all plant tons of flowers, but like even the colors they use, I don't love the colors they use. Like they use a lot of orange and yellows, my mom and sister. And while it's really pretty and I can appreciate it, it's not what I would choose for my own yard. And I remember kind of battling like, if my mom and sister were to come see this, they wouldn't like it because it was like, there's like more purples and pinks and it's much more like whimsical than their gardens. And I remember thinking they wouldn't like what I've done. And I remember thinking, that doesn't matter. They're not even going to come to see it. Like, who cares? I like what I've done. And I had to constantly give myself permission to no, just because the people in my family use yellow marigolds a lot doesn't mean that I have to. And they might disapprove of the fact that I haven't, but who cares? And just really being able to lean into what I love has helped me then expand what I love and helped me grow into who I am. And it's given me so much confidence and a sense of self that I never had, and just an ability to be different and appreciate that. And I can still appreciate their differences too. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. They're just different and they're both great. And that's something I wasn't conditioned to see things that way though growing up. It was like what they did was the best and better than anybody else, and anything shy of what they would do, like it wasn't as good, right? So it was really helpful for me to see my own strengths and grow into those, and it's just like enlivened my soul.
Yeah, it's been so fun to see Ashley with those two things specifically because they were so drastically different from who she was the previous, 40 years. Because she would have never gone after an athletic, competitive type fun event or sport before. And then with gardening, we just both never did it. It was like, it was a hard stop. But I also think that this house itself is representative of our lives and boundaries as well, because, when we bought the house, it's a 1983 Tudor home, and every square inch of it needed to be remodeled, like legit every square inch, right? And it was so interesting to see the different reactions and opinions that people had of this house. And I would say that this was also a catalyst for us where we lost friends, and it was so confusing. We were kind of like, why do people have such opinions about where we live and what our home is? And, we would get negative comments. We would get non-responses where people felt like literally nothing for us, and we were like, kind of a big event for us that we're tackling this project. It's a big part of our life and you have zero interest in it. we had people that would like not even bother to come visit us when we would invite them to like, hey, come over to the house. And it was like zero interest in it.
Or
We're
they'd
like,
come and it would be really awkward.
just super awkward. And it was like, but I had a therapist and a friend that actually brought up this quote from C.S. Lewis, but it was, I don't have it in front of me and I won't quote it verbatim, but it's the whole concept of, you thought that you were building just a small little cottage, but God had bigger plans. And, he takes out a wing there and puts in a door here. And it's this expansive thing. And he's building you into a mansion. But you wanted to just be this cozy little cottage. And that's what this house also represents for us, is that both literally and figuratively, like we have had to grow and evolve, and we have done that. And this house has done that. And it's been really cool to kind of do that simultaneously through that. We've tapped into a whole different layer of creativity.
Yeah.
And when I think of like creativity, I think of God and the creation. And if we are meant to be like him, then we are creative beings too. And where we are going to find the most happiness and joy is in that creativity. Now, with creativity comes judgment, right? Like you think of art. You can go to a museum. I like that. I don't like that, right? And the same thing happens with people. As you start to create, you're going to get judgment from other people. And that's what also makes people afraid to create and to do things that are a little bit bold and a little bit unique, but that are so authentically them, because they're afraid of the judgment that might come from that. And so, but Ashley and I, we just kind of like hunkered down into our own quiet little journey. And it was like, there were times that we were scared of like, how are we going to maintain this yard? We did not know that this many leaves were going to fall from the trees. And how are we going to even figure out how to pick them up? And, how are we going to, till the garden? And how are we going to, like, the whole thing was massive for us, but it was so symbolic and representative, I think, to us and to our phase of life. And as a result, we just love every square inch of it, as imperfect as it is. But it's just been so fun, I think, to see the physical representation of that same chapter evolution for us.
Yeah, that's true. And while you're saying that, I'm like having thoughts of just like, it is really true. It's symbolic. And again, what I thought I would always do, like, we bought this old house that needed to be renovated. I did not have the confidence to renovate houses, design a house that needed to be renovated. Like, that was totally and completely outside of my wheelhouse. I felt like one day we would find a lot and hire people to help, an architect and a designer to help us build a house, and, they'd do the work and it would look great and we'd move in and that would be it. And instead, we buy this house that needs renovation, and we did hire some help, but I eventually realized that I was paying a lot of money for people to give me ideas that I didn't fully connect with. And I just was like, I'm going to have to figure out how to tap into my own ability to create what I want, which I also didn't have the confidence to do yet. But I was wasting a lot of money on designers and getting back work that I was like, I don't really like that, So in saying that, it's true. I feel like God really has used this. And John found this house. And when he first brought me, I was like, what are you thinking? And then
it was really quite entertaining. And it's fun to look back on it in hindsight.
Yeah.
The whole time I kept like looking at Ash while we were walking through, and she just had like deer in headlights and like overwhelm, and I'm going, I don't know that she's feeling this.
And actually the interesting thing is, even more than that, there was this house that was in an area that I had always wanted to be in, and it was the cutest house. I loved it. It had these double doors with double wreaths on it, and I kind of always dreamed of that. And right before we found this house, that house went up for sale. And so John was like, this house that you love is on the market. And I'm like, no way. He's like, want to go see it? And I was like, yeah. So we go through and I feel dead, like literally dead. And there's nothing wrong with the house. It was a beautiful
Beautiful
house.
house, yeah.
And he kept looking at me. That's like the first time you kept looking at me like, do you love it? Do you love it? And I was like,
Well, I thought she was
no.
kind of overwhelmed because it was going to be a little bit of a price jump for us from where we were, and that she was kind of thinking like this wasn't possible. But I'm trying to tell her, no, we can do this. Like we can afford this house. But even though we could afford it and it was available and we could absolutely put an offer in, Ash was not feeling it at all. And
Yeah.
then we decided that we were going to probably just stay in our house in Lehigh for a while. And it was just a few months later that out of nowhere, I found this house and drug her to it.
Yeah. He sent me pictures. I was like, no way.
She didn't even hardly look at them.
No. So then, he drove through the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is full of really mature trees, and it's really beautiful. So he was like, just come see the neighborhood. And he brought me, and I was like, oh, you're right. This neighborhood is like epic. And so he's like, well, do you want to just go see the house? And I was like, fine. Like I'm literally not thinking it. And then it was as I was walking through, I'm so overwhelmed. And like the whole time I'm like, there is no way. And like at the end, our realtor's like, well, what do you want? We can find you whatever you wanted. And it was then that I started to feel like, wait, maybe I don't want to move on from this house. Cause I kept thinking, well, like that could be changed. Could be changed. Anyway, long story short, over the next few days, I just couldn't stop thinking about all the different things that I could do to this house. And suddenly I got kind of attached to it. And then it was like, we should buy this house. And then
Well, she couldn't sleep. We were up in Park City for
Labor Day
weekend.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Ash was up at 3:00 in the morning and she's on like Pinterest and stuff, just looking up ideas for what she would do to the house. And it was like, she could not get it out of her mind all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's true. So, I mean, we only bring that up to say, I'm like, it really was God that like helped me. I think like we always say God moved us to this house, and he really did. The fact that I had zero attachment or feeling at all to this house that I just had loved for years. And then I come here and, I'm like, God is the one that helped me see like, no, this is a good thing for you. And I eventually clued into that. And we know that he moved us here, and we're so grateful. But it is true in, just even the evolution of designing this house and changing it and taking it from where it was to something that we love now, and me specifically putting so much of my creative energy into it and being able to do and create something I had no idea I had the capacity for or the talent for, And it really is symbolic, I think, of our lives. And just like it looks very different than I thought. It's taken a ton of work. We had to get over a lot of people giving us messages of like, what in the world are you thinking? But also the jealousy, because it is a beautiful house. It's on our beautiful lot. Our backyard's beautiful. And, it's not, but it's like, yeah, it's all the things, but we've just had such interesting people in our lives that we haven't been given people who know how to be happy for us. A lot of them, some of them do. And it kind of weeded those people out. We were like, wow, like just where we live is creating a lot of emotions in people and kind of exposing, and nobody left our lives just on the basis of the reaction to us moving, but it was obviously deeper than that. But,
well, and I think too, like the thing that was interesting about a remodel versus a new build for us was, again, kind of the recovering people pleaser thing is that we were, and I still wrestle with it sometimes if I want it all to be perfect and buttoned up, like that it is just this flawless house, and it is not. There's a lot of flaws, and there's a lot of things that we wish that we could do. And there were times that we froze for a while, and unless we could do it perfect, we weren't going to do it. But then we eventually got to a point where we said, no, we're going to move forward with this. This slight change is going to give us joy. And so we would move forward with it, and it would in fact give us joy. And I think we kind of resigned to the fact that this house will never actually be done. Ever.
yeah,
And I am so comfortable with that now. And I think, again, that is representative of our lives too. Like we both strive to constantly be growing and progressing and stretching ourselves. and learning. And we're never going to be finished and buttoned up and perfect. And that's completely okay. And as we're going through that evolutionary state, people are going to have opinions of us as we go through our evolution too. But the point is to continue to look to God and what he has in plan for you. But I finally found the quote and about C.S. Lewis, and I want to read it real quick because I think it pertains to this whole concept. It says, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. Presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace, and he intends to come and live in it himself." And I love the visualization of that, is that that painful process is hard, but God is the one that's doing the movement. And the more you make those changes in your life, the more God will be present, and he does plan to abide there. And if we keep rejecting kind of like the God-given gifts that he's given us and kind of our divine destiny that's there, then God can't live there and abide there. And that's why it feels heavy and hollow and sad, is because those aren't gifts from the Spirit, right? That's because we're not living in alignment with who we are. And so there has to be that change. And it's so sad that people have the ability to have that level of influence over us. And so if I've learned anything through these boundaries, right, but it is that I care about two beings, right? It is God and it is my wife. And like, that's it. Everything else, I don't care. I don't care about the critics. I don't care what they say. I don't care if it embarrasses them that I'm talking about things. And the things that I've shared, online, again, 5 years ago, not a chance they ever would have come out. But I love it. It's so freeing sometimes. And it's not that I want to now just have this tell all and I'm going to tell all the deep, dark, dirty secrets, but there is this, we all have a desire for just authenticity. Isn't it so refreshing when you have people that are
Yeah.
just authentic? You're like, thank you. I'm so glad that you don't have any weird agenda or pretense, or you're trying to make me think you're someone that you're not. Authenticity is just such a beautiful thing.
Well, and I think it just comes from accepting that we're all humans and we're all messy.
Yeah.
We are all messy. And for whatever reason, we love to pretend that we're not. And past generations have given us a lot of wonderful things, but that's one of the really destructive things that they handed over to us. Is it was like, who can be the best actor of pretending like everything's perfect? And it's not.
Mhm.
We're all messy. Every one of us have. That's why we are here on earth. It's to work out our salvation. And that does actually take work on each individual soul. And we are not a finished product, and life is messy for everyone. And, we all handle that better. But for me, especially, and for you, I think we both came from perfectionistic environments. And, I laugh because John kind of became a perfectionist himself because he could. I couldn't even pretend, like I wasn't even capable, right? So I was like the person that everyone was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with her for so long? But I just kind of accepted at a young age, like I'm never going to be what they want me to be. And so I've always kind of been okay with like accepting my weaknesses and imperfections in a way of just like, I literally can't pretend I'm perfect because I didn't ever have the energy to it takes a lot of energy to be a perfectionist, right?
Yeah.
I never had the energy to be that. And so I don't know, but being able to just, talk about being a human and the different facets of that, and being able to talk about the messy parts of being human and connect with others and have people be like, thank you for putting words to experiences I've had that I've never heard anybody speak, or I haven't even known to say it like that myself, because we just don't do that. And it is freeing, and it frees us mentally to see beyond these limits of, we're very good at putting limitations on ourselves even when we grow up in that.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap up this awesome conversation, I have just one question for you.
Okay.
What would you say to someone who is afraid boundaries will ruin their life?
Oh gosh, I would just say be brave and have faith. Lean into what you know is true. And that's more in just like, yeah, the level of control you're allowing others. I think we often can feel that that's off, and be brave enough to trust that there will be a great reward on the other side. There will be pain. That will be the immediate emotion that you experience is pain. But be brave enough to see it through and know that the reward will be absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and I agree. I would also just say fear in and of itself is, again, not a gift of the spirit. And so if you are being ruled by fear, then ask yourself, where is that coming from? And then the second part of that would be do it. Like, set boundaries. Have we gone through hard things in grief? Yes, we've talked a lot about that. But I hope that this episode has given even just a tiny inkling of the joy that both Ashley and I feel as a result of putting boundaries in place in our life. And we have definitely loved the process of studying boundaries from a scriptural lens too, to say, how does God implement boundaries? And how does Christ implement boundaries? And it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And I'm so grateful for that too. But will boundaries ruin your life? No. They will change your life for the better, and then some. And I just am actually excited because I feel like we're just still in our infancy in this post-boundary like life. And I'm excited to see where it's going to evolve from here. So,
Yeah, me too. We're ever growing and changing.
yep. That's what we got for you today. We hope you have a great one. And that's it.
See ya.
See ya. All right, everyone. That wraps up another great episode of the Cleve Podcast. If there is one thing we hope you take away from today's conversation, it's this. Boundaries may cost you something, but they can also return something very sacred to you. Your clarity, your energy, your sense of self, your joy, your creativity, your marriage, your peace, your ability to hear God without all the noise. And no, boundaries do not magically remove all pain. They do not erase grief. They do not make every relationship simple. But they can create the space where healing, growth, and truth finally have room to take root. And if this conversation resonated with you, we want to invite you to join us this Wednesday night for our live event, Healing After No Contact. This event is for those who have already made a painful boundary decision and are now trying to live with the aftermath, the grief, the second guessing, the loneliness, the backlash, the complicated feeling of missing people who may not have been safe for you. We'll be talking about how to heal after no contact without drowning in guilt, how to make sense of the grief that comes after a necessary boundary, and how to begin rebuilding your life with more peace, clarity, and confidence. You can find the link to register in the show notes. And as always, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for trusting us with these conversations. And thank you for being a part of a community that is learning how to leave what is unhealthy and cleave to what is true. We hope you have a great day.